thank you all for coming. This looks like a real aesthetic super spreader. I brought some cribbing here. These kind of things. Now, of course, I've lost my place here, and that's bad. There we go. Anyway, I had written some notes down. You know, that's probably a bad sign right there, but there are a couple of lines that I like quite a bit, and probably the way you receive those will determine whether you really should stick around for the rest or skim out of them now. But at any rate, the first line is James Salter, and this line has stuck with me for a long time. I really can't get over it. And the quote, innocently, it's innocent, but I don't believe it is. And anyway, the quote is, if life passes into anything, it passes into pages. And then the second quote that's set off by that is, only the ephemeral is of lasting value. And that's Ionesco. So now you can either receive those two lines as a contradiction or a paradox. Now, if you receive it as a contradiction, the door is unlocked. If you receive it as a paradox, you break that down and it's two truths. So both of these do appear to contradict each other, but what they really do is amplify each other. And so I guess if life passes into anything, it passes into pages. When I think of that, you know, I think of how glad I am for the pages, and I guess I'd like to sort of give a plug for a few of our fallen writers, and I have in mind Sherry Simpson and Frank Sos, and also my twin brother, Frank, who passed in August of this year. But he also was a writer and has a pretty unique book called Assisted Living, which is where he spent the last 8 years of his life. But a unique situation for him in that he had the literary wherewithal to write about this situation that he lived in for 8 years. And I don't think there's anything like it. So at any rate, Amazon, if you're interested. Okay, so then let's see. See, I had written down here, a writer is a hunter and gatherer of meaning. But just what meaning is a mystery, and how it finds its way into words is a mystery too. So anyway, cancel that one. See, write all this up with one hand and erase it with the other. Okay, so then I did want to give a couple toots before we get going here. One is to my partner, Anita Stelcel, who just has a real nose for skunk. And she's been a big help with the volume of poetry, you know, and so she's kind of sniffed out somewhere between a herd and a multitude of skunks. And then the other two would be for more skunk smellers, and that's my writing group with whom I've been associated for the past 25 years or so. John Morgan, Linda Schandelmeyer, come on, don't fail me now, Cindy Hardy, Jean Anderson, okay, and Sushila Kara. So they're good skunk smellers too, and if this thing doesn't go well tonight, I would like you to hold them responsible. Okay, then I see I had scribbled down here, what is poetry? And I guess, yeah, seems like writing poetry is the art of herding mystery cats to an unexpected destination. And so I think that you writers know that there's something to that. But anyway, I think poetry is a fantastic mystery, and probably like a good number of you, I journal a lot more frequently than I exercise. And so at any rate, often will come up in the journaling is I'll write short poems or something, and then essentially forget about them. You know, I come back and make corrections and stuff. But so anyway, I was emailing my daughter a few days ago, and I just wrote down the poem of the morning, and so, which I'll read to you. And so it goes, the first snowflakes of the year are falling outside the window. Maybe I ought to do something with the rest of my life. Okay, so at any rate, I get a reply back from her, and she says, that made me laugh out loud. Now, of course, what's interesting about that is that it made her laugh out loud instead of asking me about the non sequitur. And so, of course, that's what poetry is. It sort of opens up the universe as to what makes sense. And so if you're in the wrong universe, then again, there's the door. So the question is, what made it possible for her to hear that as a poem and get a laugh out of it, as opposed to saying, I think my dad's getting on the old side. Okay, so, I better get going here. But in this regard, you know, I have kind of a, well, let's see. Yeah, here's another thing I found in my notebook or something. This life you are living is not merely a piece of the entire existence, but is, in a certain sense, the whole. And I think that's where poetry comes from, the whole. And so I have kind of a favorite story to sort of illustrate this, and it starts with a couple of young fish, and they're swimming along, and coming in the other direction is an old fish. And when the old fish gets up to the new fish, he says, how's the water, boys? And they swim on past, and a little later on, one of the young fish asks to the other, he says, what's water? So at any rate, poetry is about the water. Okay, the time's gonna be up here if I don't start reading something. So anyway, I'm really so happy you're all here. You know, as everybody knows, you can spend your 10,000 hours, you know, in a closet trying to come up with some kind of art, and you really do need to get it out. So, all right, I was just gonna dedicate this one to all Fairbanksons and this winter, which seemed to have started a couple days ago. So anyway, it's called Console. Winter is summer with the air knocked out of it. No grand plans, no pyramids, no journeys of Vasco da Gama. It's time for fire, the kettle's ruminations, light candles, wear a path to the woodpile, stay inside when wind mice run through the trees. You know, the hard part about these things is an order, you know, coming up with an order. So, all right. Okay, ordinary. My days begin in conference with coffee and the weather. Today, for instance, I thought of last night, how I stepped out the door to visit the bushes and look for the moon. Since then, an inch of snow fell, fresh linen from the sky. It was overcast, but now a clear, cold front moves in to take over the country. I know this sounds dull. You have to be there to experience how the ordinary regenerates itself. Think of sex. Like Samson, desire gets a haircut, but soon it's back, ready to break the door down. That's how it was this morning, when red shears pierced the dawn and cut down the woods. Here's one of the only poems that isn't Alaska. I was going to try to read Alaska stuff out of the book. But this is the beginning poem, Walkers. Every evening, an older man crosses the street near our house, his grizzled black dog plodding 40 feet behind. Curb to curb, their shadows move on the slant, in long single file through the fading light. Once we called to the man, and he angled over to the gate, his dog adjusting course to catch up and stand behind him like a cowboy's tired horse. With no hearing aid and no one in his life to hear, it was hard to exchange what we were curious about. Where he had grown up and lived, what he had done for work, whether he married, had children, but mostly what he did between walks. None of this was our business, so maybe it's fitting that we really learned nothing about the two companions so separate in their species, walking like ghosts into the remains of the day, the mainsprings of their lives winding down in time with ours. Well, I'll read the poem that the book title comes from, Solstice. Another year on the silent wheel of the seasons, the tide of days coming and going, the breathing of planets and sun. As outside the window, night moves west like a great ship of stars, and the trees step forward, never speaking of where they've been or what they've seen on their long voyage gathering light. Actually, the book it's really collected poems, or selected poems, because some of these poems go back 50 years. And I'm going to read one from 50 years ago. And maybe, I don't know, we'll talk about it a little bit. On returning to an old neighborhood, there's the feeling that no time has passed, that it's again a weekday, spun with small breezes and the distant high-pitched voices of children. But while the feeling is of only slight differences, it's of things the finger can't be placed upon. A sense that cars have been switched overnight, where a certain door once casually slipped behind after mornings in town no longer knows your hand. The ghost of your own absence around the details is what makes the past physically impossible. as if you had quietly passed away and were watching a summer afternoon from behind glass. So I kind of picked this out to read, A, because it's so old, and then kind of wondering about the process, the aesthetic process that goes into 50 years. Because, you know, this is in the book, not just because it was 50 years old, but I actually am happy with the poem. And I was wondering, what's the difference, you know, between then and 50 years later? And it seems like maybe it's the skunk smeller gets better, but I remember at the time, you know, I mean, of course, this wasn't the only poem I wrote, and I would write things and think, well, you know, hey, that's pretty good stuff. Well, of course, it wasn't good stuff. And of course, the difference is, well, let's see, one same thing about now and then is that it's just as hard to crack off a good poem now as it was, well, maybe the frequency is a little better now than it was back then. But you know, you think this gets easier the more you do it, and it's just not true. It doesn't get any easier. You're always waiting for some shooting star to come in and save your ass. So anyway, I was talking to my son, who's sort of gotten excited about writing a little bit, and which is really fun. And I was thinking about a metaphor for the writing process, and I thought, well, okay, 50 years ago, the way it was is that you've got a target, the same as I do now, or you do now, but when 50 years ago, you'd just lay the target out somewhere in the surroundings, and then you'd take an arrow and shoot it up in the air and pray that it was going to hit the target. Now, when you get older, you can actually see the damn target. You know, it's not 20 feet away, but at least you can see it and aim at it. And so your chances of hitting it are a little better. And so I think that's the skunk smeller takes up archery. So. No, that's great. I wanted to read it, didn't put the page number down. Six chairs outside of Fairbanks. 6 chairs are scattered around the yard, if you call these woods a yard. On the table, a barbecue, the cat, and a wooden flower pot running over with fuchsia. Today, the wind is serious. There's a hiss that worries the trees. In the distance, a motorcycle runs through its little bucket of gears. I take my shirt off, then put it back on, like I have done so many times with the world. Another Alaska poem. This is not Illinois. 3 moose at dawn. A cow moose comes around the corner through the snow. Yearling twins trail along in single file. She's huge, and I stand at the glass door watching this locomotive of an animal, the same as I would a freight train at a railroad crossing. Lights flashing and the warning gate down. This is a long moose, I think, and shut off the motor of my day, while the 3 of them move without hurry down their own tracks and grow smaller. When the lights that aren't there stop flashing and the gate rises, I remember where I am and start the day. And restart the day. But I'm clumsy getting things back into gear, the same as I'd be if the 3 camels of the wise men had just passed by following a star. Well, I don't know how much fans you are of coffee, but I suspect quite a few. So anyway, yeah, I've got a refrigerator magnet up that says I'm crabby till I get my coffee. And so anyway, I mean, it's getting pretty close to religion, really. So anyway, I thought that I need to write a poem to coffee. And yeah, actually I'm gonna give a shout out to Linda. I think the title of this poem was Making Coffee. And then I had the first line, before doing anything, and she said, hey, that should be the title. So anyway, I scrapped Making Coffee, and it's before doing anything. Before doing anything, I put on the kettle. Then I fetch the plastic holder, the filter paper, take 2 steps to the fridge for beans and 2 to the grinder. Load and detonate. Pebbles shatter until smoothing out like a plane touching down. Measure the coffee. Select a cup. The glass one hanging in the cupboard brings a touch of chandelier. Now the water. The watched pot boiling at last. The weight as it and alchemy join together on the slow trickle through. Finally the cream, ministered from just the right height, a cauliflower's dream. The hush before the orchestra begins. I pick up the steaming cup, carry it to the window. There the coffee mixes with the sunrise, and it's a whole new universe. The same one God created, also with a cup of coffee, and saw that it was good. Now here's a deep winter poem that Fairbanksans know well, the 40 Below poem. December, Chena Ridge. Morning, not quite 8. The moon, still large, shines through snowy trees and then the window. Walls a foot thick hold solid against the dusty vacuum of the cold. Plants believe this and meditate in their places on the sills. Their thanks pours out to the beam ceiling. Behind the stove, the dog groans from the labors of sleep. With this abdication, the cat now owns the world. Over the floor, she moves like a fish, the rooms of her eyes filled with moonlight and dark shifting furniture. Woodcutter's Moon. Yeah, well, anyway. What do you do with all the darkness around this place, you know? And we gotta keep warm, so I would often be out at night getting firewood. And I'd take my old dog, who was Happy until we stopped, and while I'm cutting wood, she's standing there with her paws freezing, saying, "What are we doing?" And so anyway, woodcutter's moon, the cold squeak of snow, the scrolling stars, my dog and I just shadows in the silence of 20 below, the warmth of movement, the wheeze of the saw, the xylophone sound of fresh cut rounds tossed on to the moonlit pile. Well, I guess if it's not obvious, I've spent a lot of time in my life alone and, in cabins and solitary situations. So I guess in the middle of one of these long spans, I wrote a poem called Solitude. Sunday, starting to get light. I'm tempted to name all the sleeping items in the house, the dog and cat, the plants, even the refrigerator and the nightlight humming softly in the range hood. Then I'd go outside. If I heard a bird, I'd mention that. A chickadee tossing out its tiny seed of optimism. From there, I'd start out through the trees, slowly gaining speed like a camera, panning toward the horizon. The trees would come faster now, like for a skier or a forest bird, and I'd better pay attention. Breaking from the trees, it would be an open shot over the river, all the way to the line of mountains. Now I could afford to look around, perhaps even narrate, like someone doing a video on his vacation. The important thing is, I'd be thrilled to be alive, soaring in fact. That would get me far from this kitchen and the question that never got named, whether being alone is a good or bad thing. Well, this here's one that I was born in Akron, Ohio, in the same hospital as LeBron James and Steph Curry. So, the three of us get together for reunions every now and then. And being older, of course, I taught LeBron everything he knows. Seth is from somewhere else. Steph. Okay, celebrating my birthplace, the rubber capital of the world. Being from Ohio is like bragging that you're 5'7". Still, I'm proud of Ohio, the way kids are proud of where they live, and proud of the home team when everybody else thinks the town's an armpit and the team stinks. Same with parents. Your mother may have been something of a wide load with birdcage breath in the morning, while your father wore white socks to church and hadn't had a lofty thought since Easter. But don't forget who of all the people in the whole dead zone of Akron called you in for supper when you were hungry enough to eat a horse, and who at the head of the table suggested walks with the dog in the waning evening light after that. And the dog, a stray about 5'7" in dog inches, that wandered in from the street with no more pedigree than a rubber factory worker, which was your dad, an immigrant with an accent, tired and dirty at the end of the day, but who still helped you make a bow and arrow before dozing off in a chair. He was the one, remember, who took you and the dog to the lake to swim and drown worms on weekends, hoping to catch the bluegills your mom would fry up crisp and serve on the porch with potato chips, iced tea, and lemon. Our favorite tree, or at least vying for it, the aspen. Lousy firewood, but a great talker. Aspens speak. In all the treetops, not a tremor. Sky the color of a mountain lake. No talk, no whispering, nary a twitter. Then one leaf stirs, turns to its neighbor, the neighbor to its neighbor, and soon every leaf has something to say. What amazes me is that I write this list down, and for a good quarter of them, I don't write the page number. I don't know what it's a sign of. Earth Day. Before you, the fields and trees, lake under clouds, distant showers slanting down. Like warm pockets, things travel with us. A deceased friend's laugh, stars in their lofty pond. This perfect morning, stepping from the shadows to say, I speak for them all. Yeah, this is a poem for Joe Haynes, John Haynes's really lovely wife. Loon. This morning a loon called out, pure warble of craziness or ecstasy, who can tell which? Now, as cancer spreads like autumn through the still woods of your body, you have taken flight too. And I recall your loon imitation over coffee 40 years ago. How the sudden cry startled us both, and we laughed like children. Well, I thought I'd read a poem for my son and my daughter, one each. This is the one to my son. The faint light of stars. As the day of 95 degrees was closing down, we stopped to sleep beside a river halfway up Mount Hood, where hemlocks hold the cool. This after wine and food and talk, while the light leaked away and the sky took us in its large workman's hands. Joining paths for a few days to compare notes as men. It was my son and I who stopped, perhaps to sense some secret shared with DNA. Morning now, he sleeps beside the falling water, while early sunlight filters through the trees. Last night, like stars so faint they can't be seen directly, or shooting stars that plow up fire and go. We both knew and did not speak, and spoke but did not know. Well, this is a poem that came from the artist in residence at Denali, and part of that whole artist in residence shtick is that they dump you out at some remote place with a couple of radios and say, hope we see you again in a week. And I think people in the room have also had that position, but for some reason I got stuck with winter. And so anyway, I got dumped out at the Savage River cabin, you know, and they try to make it original and rustic, which means the wind blows right through it and the stove isn't worth anything. So anyway, here's something that came out of that week's sequester there. Shakespeare and the Fly. And a quote from King Lear: as flies to wanton boys are we to the gods. Sunup at Denali National Park. A fly wakes and buzzes around the Savage River cabin, finally stopped by the window. It's the same fly that buzzed me last night, landing repeatedly on my face and in my hair. To be or not to be, really a question for the fly. My response last night was an immediate, knee-jerk, double thumbs down, but I didn't want to squash him on my face or head. After hasty deliberation, I took a swat anyway and missed, knocking off my glasses and headlamp. Act 1 went to the fly. But back to the window, where the fly buzzes along the glass, not quite getting the concept and consequences of an invisible barrier in gladiatorial combat. I have his number now, and my face will not be in the way this time, except as a reflection and perhaps as a kind of metaphorical killing field. So I take the book I was reading and go after him with 100 selected poems. Not many of us can survive 100 poems. A couple of stabs, and there's a satisfying sound like the crunch of lettuce. Well, not completely satisfying, because even a wanton boy can harbor misgivings about playing God. After all, a fly wants to live as much as I do. But then I don't fly around his room buzzing, and I don't land on his face. Act 2 goes to oblivion. Well, I should read the poem to my daughter because God is closing in. Travels with Kate. Well, yeah, a little background here. In 1990, anyway, when she was 13, I took her to France on a bicycle trip. And it was really terrific thing to do because at 13, she wasn't embarrassed to be with me and didn't think I was a total fool. So in fact, she actually had to count on me for all kinds of things like lodging, which was sleeping out, and food, which was out of the supermarket. So anyway, travels with Kate. Auxerre, Fontainebleau, Vézelay. The towns and country in between should remember us. Our bicycles made love to their streets. For Kate, it was work in a new place. Pedals turning circles into somewhere else. Hardwood forests, fields with muscled horses, paths along rivers, shimmering from barge wakes into villages of how many generations? floating in the sensuality of morning. For me, the father, it was nostalgia as it happened, daughter before the woman she would become, changing with the countryside. Kate, I won't forget. I have pictures of you standing in red poppies up to your hips, but that is not what I mean. More the things that can't be photographed, the clean sky of the present, as we rested on our handlebars at the top of the cool stone bridge with the water below braiding grass and sky. Drinking wine with Lee Poe. This was a real bear to get. These two people helped, so we spent a good bit of time chasing skunks.
And drinking wine.
Drinking wine with Lee Poe, Chinese poet, Tang Dynasty. I'm in a bar. Well, not exactly. Exactly, I'm in a cabin sitting by a window that looks over the Tanana River Valley. The sun set an hour ago, and a long twilight now glows behind the Alaska Range that stretches all the way from Canada to the giant stepping stones of the Aleutians, where the sun is still up and the sea is lonely from keeping the company of rocks. Am I lonely too, in this deserted place, forced to be my own bartender, to laugh at my own jokes? I consider this as I pour myself a glass of wine. Then I notice Lee Poe. I didn't hear him slip in, but I know he likes his wine, and so I pour him a glass too. He nods and says nothing, and I say nothing, and together we sit like two anglers on the shore of a great lake as the moon rises and stars all over the sky pop out the doors of their little huts. An epic. This morning, I'd like to write an epic. I admire them so much. Though it's early, I know it won't happen. I'm too happy right in this room, holding my coffee, listening to opera, and the birds singing in the rain outside the open window. Nose between paws, the dog dozes on her rug. I look at her, but see nothing epic. Just contentment, like someone enjoying warm mittens. Raindrops smack the maple leaves not 10 feet away. They quiver, and I hear the impacts when the music subsides. For a few moments, the sun breaks through. Wet leaves shine. The music opens into a great distance. Another Fairbanks, but a different season. I seem to write lots of winter, fall, very few summer stuff. I guess we're just all too damn busy to do much, but at any rate, forecast 90 degrees. In the kitchen, where I've spent so many summers with the door closed because of mosquitoes, I now sit in sweet morning air with sounds of the neighborhood wafting through the screen door I built yesterday in 2 hours after thinking about it for 20 years.
Ode to your father.
Here's another Fairbanks one. The curmudgeon. When my state went off daylight savings time, I stayed on. With elections near, I venture to my mailbox once a week to clear the logjam of propaganda. Beyond weather, nothing excites me. This morning the phone rang. I looked at it like a turtle had spoken. Well, here's one that's getting close to the end here before the sheep crook comes out. Venus. I always thought death might be like this. Cold and clear after snow, me in the kitchen before dawn, with everything I've ever known shining bright inside me. And a fitting last one if I can find it. I can't believe that I didn't write the page numbers down. All right, so this is what it all comes to. Sharing a house with a one-eyed cat and a deaf dog, watching another sunrise. God, what did I do to deserve this? I don't know, but thank you. And hey, thank you. Well.
Does anybody have any questions for John?